or tigers don't like cages. From the American Revolution all the way up to modern day with the turmoil in Syria, revolution fervor has remained under our microscope. And while in some revolutions it may be hard to distinguish what is truly being fought for, the first guess should always be what John Locke told us in the 18th century with his rash talk of inalienable rights. A right today is not a privilege. A right is the basic structure of the human dignity. Measuring the blood spilled throughout history, fighting for rights, it's hard to argue. Take any point in history and you'll see the revolutions fighting to obtain suppressed rights, or prosperous civilizations constantly debating and scrutinizing what a right truly is. Then what's a responsibility? Does it go hand in hand with the right? Do we spill blood for responsibility, or is it simply a tool to gain a right? Ask that to the leaders of the Underground Railroad who led the people to the light of freedom. Ask that to the politicians in Britain and France in the 1940s refusing to back down from the menace of fascism and its suppression of rights, or the military commander leading his troops on to death or murder in protection of their nation's rights. Pathos aside, the history of humankind has shown how we feel responsible for our rights and the rights of others. They are indeed one and the same. For the purpose of further expressing and hopefully proving this declaration, I will be examining a specific time period in history, the Cold War. World War II is not just a war between nations, it was a war of ideologies. Should rights be suppressed for control, or should control be minimized for people to be free? It wasn't even a handful of years after this great debate it seemed settled that the debate about a right was beginning its 30-year boxing match with the legendary standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. A debate where the U.S. clearly stood on the side of rights, but was one of the nation's all-time influential and revered people responsible enough to fight for this right. The answer lies within. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born at 83 Beale Street in Brookline, Massachusetts on May 29, 1917, son to businessman and politician Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr. Prominent for his role as the 44th United States Ambassador to the United Kingdom, he was already a member of a political family, attending various New England schools as a child in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York. He was also destined for higher education. After graduating from Harvard and 4 years of the United States Naval Service is when his illustrious political career springboarded, beginning with a term in the House of Representatives and ending when he would ultimately run for and succeed in investing Republican Vice President Richard Nixon for the presidency of the United States on November 8, 1960. JFK was the youngest man elected president in the history of the United States, which still stands to this day. Would this translate to him being the most irresponsible president as well? Were his choices as president reflective of his personality or simply made in spite of it? The people surrounding him during this time were asking some of the same questions, attempting to get a feel for who the president really was. JFK already had much to prove. Dean Aikson, Secretary of State during the Truman administration, was the reason he got no extreme opposition from the then current President Truman in 1958. In fact, Aikson details in an April 27, 1964 interview when debating the next candidates for president, Truman and his cabinet couldn't decide, leading Truman to desire a national press conference where Truman would offer extreme opposition to Kennedy. Convinced this would be a bad move, Aikson called Mr. Truman on the telephone, and we had a long conversation in which I pointed out that this was not going to do any good at all. I finally got him to promise that he would not say certain things which he had in mind to say. John F. Kennedy was not held in high regard by the President of the United States, which helps us see how he had shown both glimpses and doubts of greatness during his time in Congress. Though President Kennedy helped dispel some of these doubts with his handling of humanity's closest brush with nuclear war, the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, the Big Kahuna, while calling on a naval blockade to prevent Soviet access to Cuba, Kennedy also showed he was no war hawk. This is expressly detailed in the president's letter to Khrushchev in wake of the crisis. In the letter, Kennedy states, "At our meeting in Vienna and subsequently, I expressed our readiness and desire to find, through peaceful negotiation, a solution to any and all problems that divide us. At the same time, I made clear in the view of the objectives of the ideology to which you adhere, the United States would not tolerate any action on your part which in a major way disturbed the existing overall balance of the power in the world." This measured, honest approach of the situation subsequently led to its diffusion and the aversion of a nuclear catastrophe. And avoiding nuclear catastrophes certainly can prove to a lot of people you're capable and responsible for doing your job, as JFK was praised by the American people for his handling of the bleak situation. Though whether or not his personal life can help us determine if JFK is an example for the relationship between rights and responsibilities is the true question we must answer. Jackie Kennedy was with the president right from the start of his rise, as they were wed before his first stint in the House of Representatives. The most beautiful first lady ever known to Americans at this time, the first American babe. Behind the smiles and glamour of the couple's pictures lied a dark secret. Their marriage wasn't perfect American matrimony like everyone was led to believe, as numerous accounts emerged that, when put together a portrait of a loveless marriage. The Huffington Post details in a February 8, 2012 article the various alleged affairs the president had with other women, fleshed out in various interviews and publications. These include A Very Private Woman, The Life and Unsolved Murder of Presidential Mistress Mary Meyer, and The Dark Side of Camelot, which details an affair with two young staff aides, and the People's Magazine feature on Judith Exner, My Story, and 69-year-old Mimi Alford also detailed in various 2012 interviews her daily routine with the president during her stint as a White House intern. She would swim with the president at noon or at the end of the workday, race back to her desk, and wait for a call to visit him upstairs. The governing factor behind these calls, of course, was the president, or more accurately, the absence of Mrs. Kennedy. The president's notorious string of affairs wasn't even close to stopping there. The Independent details in an August 6, 2013 article President Kennedy's affair with the pinnacle of feminism and the beauty of the time, the second American babe, Marilyn Monroe. The article fleshes out Jackie's blind eye to most JFK's affairs, but her displeasure of her husband fooling around with the most desired woman in the world. In fact, Peter Lawford, brother-in-law to President Kennedy, tells about how Monroe called Jackie to confess to the affair and to tell that her husband had already agreed to leave his family and set up home with the actress. An encounter where Jackie simply responded, "Marilyn, you'll marry Jack, that's great. You'll move into the White House and you'll assume the responsibilities of first ladies and I'll move out and you'll have all the problems." Ooh, snap. And the president wasn't simply fooling around with ladies. Though not romantically involved with Frank Sinatra, in the biography Frank Sinatra, an American Legend, the author tells about the powerful friendship between the president and Sinatra, who is alleged to have provided the president with prostitutes. When it comes to the president and his romantic life, there's no easy answer to the ties with his responsibility. Perhaps he is not a truly healthy man. A presidential historian Robert Dallek, a history professor at Boston University, told ABC News' Good Morning America there was hardly a day that went by that he didn't suffer terribly. He suffered from chronic lower back pain, colitis, prostatitis, practically everything you can think of that would suck really bad. And yet he continued to lead the country in the face of so much turmoil. The truth is, we'll never truly know how the whole story of John F. Kennedy went. The only pieces of history that we can examine with accuracy are how he affected the world with his decisions, such as his wise handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and how he took an uncompromising stand for freedom and rights during the Cold War, a time when the question of whether or not rights are worth waging nuclear war for was being asked. We can draw from President Kennedy that despite his perceived flaws of character, he was somehow able to rise above it all and effectively lead the nation before his fatal assassination. A man arising from the burdens of society, taking responsibility by its reins and waging a war for freedom and rights. Sounds like a familiar narrative to me.
And that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free. Who wish to be free.